while it's obvious that if you want to continue to explore, you must survive, I think the reverse is true. I think that as a species, if you want to improve your chances of survival, you absolutely must explore. If we talked in 1913 about exploring Antarctica, we'd probably agree that it was incredibly hazardous and without any real values. And yet, in the decades that followed and the scientific exploitation of that continent came untold scientific knowledge, and not just any knowledge, but knowledge that may one day literally save the planet. The ice cores that were retrieved from Antarctica, the bubbles of paleo-atmosphere, the bubbles which were representative of the ancient atmosphere of the Earth, gave us the firmest evidence that we have in hand that the global climate is changing and that it's warming up, and warming up in a way that may one day threaten all life on the planet. And so what starts with Scott and Amundsen and this seemingly absurd race to the extremes of the Earth in the century that follows becomes a body of scientific exploration and knowledge that potentially has, literally has the potential to save the planet. And so that's why all scientific exploration is worth it, because you never know what you're going to get and you never know how important it's going to be. Probably the best example of the relationship between exploration and medicine is the story of the first sort of closed heart surgeries. I mean, we remember the first human heart transplants undertaken by Barnard and his competitors in the 1960s. But we very rarely remember what led up to that. So it wasn't really until First World War I and then World War II arrived, and this wave of people with injuries to their hearts arrived, and medicine was faced with this need to start probing the heart and seeing if it could be interfered with. And it wasn't until World War II, in the wake of the D-Day Normandy landings and later the Battle of the Bulge, that surgeons again were confronted with many dozens of patients with shrapnel or bullet wounds to the heart that needed attending to, that this technique was developed for operating on the heart and removing foreign bodies. Now, so when you look at that history and you compare it to the way we explored Antarctica, it has the same sort of history. So I really do think that a lot of what we achieved in medicine in the 20th century were feats of exploration as bold and as fraught with hazard as geographical explorations of the same age. To determine whether or not we can solve the problem of nuclear fusion, I would be interested to know whether there's some fundamental reason why that can't be cracked as an answer to the energy crisis. That, I think, is one of the huge, big challenges to science and engineering of the 20th century, and it's one we need to have an answer to, because I think, you know, a future in which we are able to solve the problem of nuclear fusion as a source of energy looks very, very, very different from one in which it's insoluble. We have this enormous hubris, actually, that we know at any given time, we know what the big problems are, that we can foresee what we're going to need. But, you know, if you look throughout history, we would never really have known. We never foresaw what was coming next. All we ever do at any moment in history is, you know, tackle with the problems that seem immediately obvious to us, and our ability to see into the future about what knowledge we need to protect us is almost entirely absent. And I don't think now is any different from the past. I think that, you know, yes, you need to tackle the problems of today and the economy and the problems of disease that we have, but you need to keep an eye on the long term, and you can only do that by continuing the way that we always have in exploration and in science, and learning more about the natural world around us in the hope that some way, that bet that you make now pays itself off in future generations in ways you could never imagine. We've seen that over and over and over again, and we need to make sure that we preserve that today.